Good morning, church.
Good morning.
Mother's Day to everyone. Hope you all have a wonderful day. I have to say mine started with breakfast in bed. My daughter Mari made me scrambled eggs and Lucky Charms. Both delicious. Then my husband did the dishes before choir.
Wow.
Anyway, as most of you know, Keith and I recently experienced a tragedy in our family. Most of you prayed for us on more than one occasion. Our 20-year-old nephew, Robbie, was shot through a window in the bedroom of his home in front of his brother. It's the first serious loss we've faced since becoming disciples a little over 2 years ago. And how we reacted to and felt about the situation was remarkably different than it would have been before we were baptized. And I just felt like I needed to share this experience with all of you, but particularly to those who might be visiting today, studying the Bible, or maybe just curious about God. So, I know this is a little bit of a heavy subject to discuss on Mother's Day, but just stay with me. It's worth it. Robbie was shot several times. The most severe injury was a bullet to the back of the head that pierced his brain. He didn't die right away. He spent several days in the ICU of Mass General while doctors tried to save his life. After several procedures and attempts to control the brain swelling, it was determined that he would not survive, and his parents elected to donate his organs. It took a day or two to arrange the donations, but at last the time came to disconnect the life support. Robbie's parents, Karen, Darren, and his brother, young Darren, were to be in the room with Robbie when he passed, and then he would be whisked into the OR for the actual harvesting of the organs. Keith and I, along with innumerable aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and friends, were in the waiting room sitting silently, just sort of trying to comprehend and come to grips with what was happening a couple of floors below us. About 20 minutes went by, and we heard the door to the ICU open, and Karen, Darren, and young Darren reappeared in the hallway. And what I saw at that moment will stay with me for the rest of my life. The look of shock and pain on their faces was just seared into my memory. I will never forget that. The body language was almost as if somebody had just shoved them and they were trying to catch themselves. They were dressed in these white suits that they needed to be in to just protect the environment for the organ donation. It was just surreal and painful and the most shocking moment I can ever really remember experiencing. They had just watched their child die, and it broke my heart. And I have to say that, or I have to admit that my very first thought was that the person who pulled that trigger ought to have to sit and watch that scene over and over again for all eternity to fully understand and comprehend the loss that they had inflicted on our family. And even though, I'm a disciple now, I'm still a product of the world, and it does take work controlling these instincts, this desire for revenge. But, as time went on and we left the hospital and I had an opportunity to sort of think about and process what had happened, I realized that what I had glimpsed was the most pure love that we have as humans. The love of, I knew at that moment that either Karen, Darren, or young Darren would have gladly given their lives to save Robbie's. They didn't have that choice. Here we are on Mother's Day, a day when we celebrate that purest form of love we have as people. It's the closest love we have to the love of God. Can you imagine the loss of a child? I mean, I get sick to my stomach just thinking about the loss of one of my children. But imagine for a moment, not that you've just lost a child, but that your child was murdered. And then not just murdered, but tortured, reviled, and scorned while you watched. And I think you know where I'm going with this. God sent the Son in whom he was well pleased to the world he created as an ambassador of peace. Jesus was his expression of reconciliation, and Jesus was perfect. God sent him knowing that he would have to watch his blameless child die at the hands of those that he created in his own image. At any point, God could have chosen to spare his child. At any moment, Jesus could have chosen to save himself. But they didn't. Jesus died alone on the cross, feeling forsaken. Can you imagine a love powerful enough to make any one of you willing to watch your child die, broken and alone, calling out for you, all while you could at any moment stop it? I can't even conceive of it. A love that strong is beyond human comprehension. Yet it is lavished on all of us and each of us. For God so loved the world that he gave, so loved the world. That word so, it seems so small, but it's so important. Loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. You know, God could have made us to love him, sort of the way the flowers love the sun. Given the sacrifice he made for us, it wouldn't be unreasonable for him to feel justified in expecting or even demanding our love in return. But that isn't what he wants from us. He gives us free will so we can choose to love him. And then he can rejoice in that choice. The choice has implications. And the implication is that we will make the wrong choices about matters both large and small. And the person who shot Robbie made the wrong choice. We can choose to forgive this choice, or we can choose to hate because of it. I choose to forgive because as an indirect result of that choice, I was inspired to a newfound understanding of the unfathomable depth of God's love. And God works through all of our choices, both right and wrong, always trying to bring us to him. I encourage you to seek God's love with all of your heart, mind, body, and soul. I can't promise that once you choose to love God in return that your love will be all puppies and kittens, or that you will never experience loss. But I can promise you that you will never feel alone, unguided, or unloved.
Amen.